Hello, everyone. I hope you're well. Let's talk about conscience today. We've been discussing ethical systems and what metaethics is, how we should connect with our sense of right and wrong. But so far, the word conscience has been absent. And it's quite key when we think about acting in an ethical way, when we try to understand what is right or wrong. Because after all, we can, do all kind of misdeeds and to not feel anything unless there's this thing that we call conscience that tells us you should regret what you did, you should apologize, you should share what you did and let other people know. The word conscience comes from Latin, for a change, and it comes from the word cum scire. With conscience, we try to express a knowledge, scire, that encompass all of us. So conscience is an awareness that is awake inside of us and tells us, steers our action toward a higher level of awareness. It's curious because when you read textbooks, they tend to say that the history of conscience is mostly eradicated in the history of religion and especially in Christian traditions and so on, or monotheistic, at least, traditions. I don't find this accurate. Because after all, we have our first exploration of what we call today conscience with the exploration of our consciousness. So we are conscientious of what we do because there's something larger that is our consciousness that tells us if we are in the right or wrong direction. So in that sense, when we examine philosophy, the history of philosophy, we already find a representation of what is considered today conscience, for example, in the works of Plato. Plato, for example, in the Phaedrus, presents us with the interesting myth of the chariot and describes our soul as being driven by two horses, a black one and a white one. So one horse points us down, and it's the horse of the instincts, of the impulses, of the emotions, and so on. And the other horse points us upwards, which is the horse of which represents metaphorically our courage, our virtues, our values, and so on. So the chariotee, the driver, is our rational part that tries to combine the forces of both, which are equally important, to go in the right direction. Now, when you look at this myth, it's very hard not to see the similarities with what we will read more extensively in the 20th century, at the beginning of the 1900s, with Sigmund Freud and this theory of the id, ego, and superego. Right. The word id points to the Latin it, and it's basically the black horse. So it's the whole of our all our impulses, instincts, emotions that blocks us down earth and prevents us, well, connects us with our body, but at the same time, if we rely too much on them, we might lose our ability to see through situations and to reflect calmly on things. And then there's the superego, which can be compared to the white horse that is, the set of rules, of values, of good behaviors that we introjected at a very young age. And that's the dangerous part. And tells us how we should behave. So often the ego, which is this subject that drives our actions in the world, is driven by a difficult balance of a 5, 6 years old that introjected certain rules that cannot be touched, and that's the problem of characters that are too rigid, or by luxurious instincts and impulses that push them always in a direction that is a sensuous and not enough rational. So here we have a vision of conscience that is very much influenced by ancient philosophy and takes a big portion of the contemporary way in which we think about the way in which we rule over ourselves. We decide how to act in a proper manner in a society, how to conduct ourselves in the society. So we try hard to work on our ego to reduce its power of action and try to become more and more of human beings capable of balancing our instincts and our rigidities. It is true, though, that certainly the word conscience was important in Christianity. Protestants, for example, Martin Luther considered conscience as, the voice that is inside of us that tells us the right thing to do, and we can listen to it or not. But there's this voice. While St. Thomas, for example, says that conscience has a neutral attitude, there is a neutral voice. So it doesn't tell us actually what is the right or wrong thing to do, but is a form of guidance that grows with us and constitutes a form of moral knowledge that we need to cultivate and groom as we develop in life. So what can we say about conscience? Certainly there's an inner part of us that without words, with intuitions can tell us when we're doing the right thing and when it's not the right thing. It's hard, though, to understand what the right voice is to be followed. It's hard to understand what the right thing to do is if there's no voice at all, if we keep living in a life in which not many intuitions are provided to us, where there's doubt and self-consciousness at each step. So certainly it's useful to rely on a certain moral compass as conscience can be. At the same time, we cannot clearly base the ethical committees or deontological codes on conscience only because it's a very subjective principle that can change according to the person. Although If you look at Plato, later on to Jung, maybe a little bit of Freud, consciousness is not consciousness, which is the common ground for conscience, is not something individual. It does not belong to me only, but it's a collective ground that speaks to all of us, to each one of us in a different way. So could be a subjective principle, but at the same time, it has a very universal and common ground. Anyway, an interesting topic certainly to explore and to reflect on when discussing about ethical problems. I hope you enjoyed this little pill, and see you next week. Bye, everyone.